So I want to just follow up my last video with a little bit more information, a little bit more in depth into the cab section of the Helix. I touched on it a fair amount in the last video, but the last video was more geared towards setting up the whole signal flow, the whole chain from compression, EQ, overdrive pedals, how I'd set the amps and everything else. But I didn't want that to run too long, so I didn't want to really spend any longer on the cab section. But I think the cab section is such an important topic and so influential to the overall sound we're going to get out of the Helix. I think it's worth just diving in and examining that a little bit more. So we'll talk a little bit about, dive into a little bit more about each individual microphone model, the characteristics of each one, and also the use of dual cabs, which I think is a really, really important feature for us to give us the ability to be able to dial in the tone we want. So let's take a look in. What I've done is I've taken the same patch that was the one we used in the first video, and I just copied it and I've called it video dual cab because I'm going to ultimately end up dialing in dual cab more for the purpose, less for the purpose of using two cabinets, more for the purpose of using two different microphones and blending those to get the sound we want. So here we have the same patch that we were using yesterday, or in the last video. So admittedly, it's a little bit on the warmer, darker sound. That may not be somebody's preference. I find a lot of times I record like that because then during mixdown, I'll boost mid frequencies and whatever to taste. I just don't want something overly bright and harsh where I can't really get rid of that sound after it's kind of burned into the sound. So this here, you can add some sparkle to it if you so desire. But you can also do that by using different mics and cabinets. So if we just go into the cab section here, what we had ended up with was a single 412 Greenback 25 cabinet with the Coles 4038 ribbon mic pulled 12 inches back, like we had mentioned in the first video, which was how we kind of got rid of some of that low end that we didn't want in there. Now that gives you that definitely a very warm tone overall. What we're going to do is we're going to switch that over to a dual cab. So basically just clicking up here, going down to where it says single over here, clicking that and then switching that out to a dual. Now you'll notice right away here it put in a 112 lead 80 cabinet. I don't really want to dive into going through all of these cabinets that Line 6 has provided for us. There's so many great cabinets that we can use. This is one of the reasons why I find a lot of people just automatically dive into using IRs, external or third-party IRs. And I really haven't found the need to yet in using the Helix. I'm so happy with what Line 6 has provided for us. And they've done such a fine job, like I mentioned in the last video, with the microphone models and with the cabinet model. So I'm not going to go through that. That's really going to be a personal preference, going through trying the cabinet you think works best for the sound you're after. So I'm going to come over to this one that it added in as the 112 lead 80. I'm just going to put in another 412 greenback, just so we've got two of the same cabinet, which is oftentimes going to be what a situation is in a real studio, right? You're going to throw two microphones on the same cabinet, or maybe even the same speaker, So we'll try to mimic that situation as much as possible. So what you'll notice happen when I switch it over to the dual is the Helix still remembered my settings on cab 1. So I have the 4038 ribbon, 12 inches back, no low cut and high cut, because if you remember from the first video, I added that in this block right here, our low cut and high cut filters. So I'm going to leave that one alone. We are going to come back and play with the level on this afterwards, but for now we're going to focus on the new cabinets. So actually, to start off with, I'm going to go over to the original cabinet. We already know what that one sounds like. I'm going to pull the level back to 0. Well, it's not 0, it's minus 60 dB on the Coles 4038 ribbon mic. And I'm going to come in and focus on hearing what the different mics sound like on this cabinet. So I'll just boost this up. The default setting is a Shure SM57 dynamic, 1 inch from the cone. Like we mentioned in the last video, that's going to be a pretty typical rock and roll sound, but it's going to be a much less of the bottom, warm bottom end and more of the piercing, possibly piercing high end. If I go back, and I'll just take that back down and compare that to what we had previous with the Coles mic. Very different tone. I mean, the 57 cuts, but there's not a lot of nice bottom end. There's not a lot of warmth to it. It's just a really typical rock and roll sound. But there's going to be components in both of those that are going to be very usable. And I think it's important to just understand what each mic we want to blend does on its own before we can decide how we want to blend them together. So back again to the 57. Fine tone, could be totally usable. Again, we could play with the distance on this. I probably wouldn't on this because you're just going to lose more low end as we pull it back. If we were to take this and go 12 inches off with that, there's really very little low end now. We've really thinned that sound out. Maybe that's a perfect tone for it. You know, maybe for we've doubled or triple tracked something and we just need something that really cuts. That could be perfect for it. You know, so I'll never discount any of these possibilities. It really depends on the scenario, but we're just trying to dial in a good all-purpose tone. So let's just go back to 1 inch. Now let's just focus on going through the different mic models here. We had the 57 dynamic, the 409, which I believe is the Sennheiser E409. Again, it's got that thin kind of cutting dynamic mic sound. We'll go to the next one. This is one of my favorite dynamics, the 421. It's going to be a little bit beefier than a lot of dynamic mics, so a little bit fatter than, let's say, the Shure SM57. It's a nice mic. It's probably my favorite dynamic mic to use in real life and in the Helix if I am going to go that route. Just has a little something nicer in the bottom end, I like. Next, 30 dynamic. Kind of a nasally mid-range on that. The 20 dynamic. Now we're back into the ribbon mics. We talked about those in the last video. Again, great mics, my favorites. But you can hear much warmer. That's the 121, the 160. The 4038, much more bottom here. And that's why when we were using it on the other cabinet, we pulled it back 12 inches off the... So if I even go back to the 121, and pull that back with, let's say, even 7.5 inches. It sounds a little bit more like the dynamic mics, but still with a warmer low end and not as cutting and piercing on the highs. Okay, so let's get through those. Now we're into the condenser mics, which are going to have a little more high end. Not quite the same as the dynamic. So take a listen. This is an AKG 414 model. Very nice balanced tone. These are the Neumann mics, 84. Again, not a bad tone. The U67. Nice bottom end on that one. The 87. Uh, 47. 112 dynamic. Now we're back to that dynamic kind of piercing highs, mids, not as much low end. 12 dynamic. Very nasally mid-range sound, but again, it might be the perfect blend with another microphone, or maybe that's the sound you're after and it's just going to cut just the right way, you know. So the 7 dynamic. Which I believe is Shure SM7, I think. So you can really hear how each mic becomes its own equalizer, essentially. So, you know, instead of grabbing an EQ necessarily right off the bat, instead of going to the amps EQ, or once we have that dialed in, we can really affect the sound by just mixing and matching these cabinets. So let's go back through now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find a tone that I kind of liked here. Well, you know what? Let's just go with the 57 because that's such a staple microphone for rock guitar sounds, right? So let's just go. We won't even touch any of it. We'll keep it. I'll just keep it plus 2 dB in the mix of the level of that particular cab. 1 inch off is fine because I don't want to cut too many of those lows out. And I'm going to leave everything else just stock. But what I'm going to do is slowly blend in the Coles 4038, which we were using in the last video, solely in the last video, which had that dark kind of warm sound to it. So right now at minus 60 dB, you're not going to hear any of that basically. And I think really and honestly, I don't know if you're going to notice if I turn this cab off with the 57 for a second. I don't think we even really noticed the sound come in until, you know, I'm at minus 21 and there's barely any sound coming out from that. So let's just start there. We'll come back over and I'll bring the SM57 back up to, I don't know where I had that plus 2 dB or down there. Okay, so now we'll listen to this. You're not going to hear much of the 4038 mixed in here yet, but so that's mostly just SM57. I'm going to play a chord and hold it. I'm just going to slowly roll in the 4038 cab and just sort of listen for the bottom end warming up and some of the mid-range getting a little bit warmer. And then I'll play a little bit more with it as well. So here we go. Right there around minus 10 dB, you can kind of start hearing that roll in a little bit. Still very SM57-ish there to my ear. So let's bring this up, say minus 5 on the Coles. Okay, still a lot of SM57. We'll blend in a little bit more of the Coles. So now we're at plus 2 dB on the level on this SM57 and minus 2 dB on the Coles. So now we're getting a little bit more of a balanced tone. It's not, let me just yank out the Coles again. That's the 57 just on its own. And that's mixed in with the Coles. Now, what if we just bring them both equal to 0 dB? It's a very different tone than what we had yesterday. If I go back and pull, or in the last video, sorry. Obviously you can tell I shot it yesterday. Here's just the Coles again. Much warmer, you know, bottom end to it. I like the sound of the Coles more. So I would kind of go the opposite, where I would say, okay, let's keep the Coles as the ribbon mic as our main tone. And I'm going to bring in the 57 to taste. So we'll start it off maybe minus 11. Actually, let me do this. I'll hit a chord again and then just kind of roll it up to see where we can hear it come in. Right there around minus 8, you start hearing that little bit of the 57 fizziness, you know? I'll roll up a little more. Now I'm starting to hear a little bit too much of the 57, so I was kind of liking it back here, minus 8.6. Maybe minus 9. I'm hearing everything I still like from the Coles, with a little bit more edge from the dynamic mic, you know. So that you can see how you can just play with this endlessly and come up with a million different combinations. We haven't even looked at different cabs yet. What if I go to a mic a dynamic mic I actually like even more, like a 421, and blend that in? See, already some of what I don't like about the 57 is gone, just because I love the sound of the 421 more. We'll blend that. That'll allow me maybe to blend it in a little bit more. Go to minus 5. That's starting to sound really nice to me. Let's just run through a couple different ones. I really liked a lot of the condenser mics. E67, we'll blend that in. And because that's not as biting, we could probably go a little higher with it. We'll go minus 3.5. That's a very nice tone. I'll just go through a couple of the other condensers. Now it's going to be not a dramatic change just because we have those set so low. Maybe I'll just crank them up so they're both kind of up around the same level or close. This is the 47 with the Coles. So that's nothing wrong with that either. The SM7 Dynamic's a nice mic as well, blended with the Coles. Really nice combination there with those blended. It's a slightly 2 dB higher on, I have the Coles 43 at plus 2 dB and the SM7 at 0. So, and we could try that on the different snapshots where in the last video we were using the Tube Screamer with the delay on. See if that, yeah, so there. That's a nice tone. Cuts, still got the warmth from the ribbon mic. The point is I could go on and experiment with this for hours, literally, with different cabinets, different mic combinations. But the point here is we have so much power right within the cab section here. You put dual cabs on, play around. Some of my favorite combinations is going to be a ribbon mic, the R121, the M160, the 4038. Play around with the distance from the speaker cabinet just to get your bottom where you want it. And then if you find that doesn't cut as much, well, then you can bring in whatever. You can take whatever you've found the harshest mic, dynamic mic, just blend that into taste just a little bit. It's going to act like an EQ. The thing I really suggest, though, is go through each mic, set just at 1 inch, and listen to the characteristics and sort of get used to what each mic does and how it sounds, just on one cabinet. And with that knowledge, then it's going to allow you to be able to almost predict what's going to sound good when it's blended together. I just know for myself, I'm going to go for ribbon mic. Oftentimes that's going to be fine for me. I'm just happy with that. I'm going to play around with EQ. But the odd time, then I'll grab another one and just blend in because I want something to cut a little bit more. So I go for a 57, or I go for a 421, or I go for a U87, or something of that manner to just bring that certain something that maybe was missing for a particular situation to my cab. So anyways, I don't know if that's of any use to anybody. I hope it is. It's another way that I kind of do what I do on the Helix. But I see so many people posting about third-party IRs. I've got to buy third-party IRs. I go, well, what's the best ones? Is it this one? Is it that one? And don't get me wrong, there's some great IRs out there, and you can get great results with it. It just feels like almost a cumbersome way of doing things when we have such a simple way of doing it built right into the Helix. That allows us so many possibilities so quickly. And that to me is half the battle, right? If I'm in a creative workflow where I want to play something or I'm learning a cover solo, or I don't want to be, messing around too much to get the sound I want. I want it to be there really quickly. So I don't want to have to choose from 200 IRs when I've got something in here that's going to get me, I think, in my opinion, others might feel different, and that, we all hear things differently. So it's going to get me there much faster, and then I can just get to playing and creating, So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't checked out part 1, check it out. It's on my channel. Please, if you like this, hit the subscribe button. Feel free to share it, and I'm going to see what other videos we can come up with. If you have any ideas for videos, please let me know. I'd love to do something, if enough people are interested in a particular topic that I can help out with, I'd be happy to do that. But for now, thanks for watching.